Hi everyone, this is Melissa Keller, Director of Events and Project Management for Vineyard Worship. We release new music on the first Friday of every month. Cherry Blossoms is Vineyard Worship's long-awaited monthly single for April 2020. Written by worship leader and songwriter Andy Squires, Cherry Blossoms is a song of immense hope that has been an underground phenomenon since its release in 2015. Featuring the voice of Emmy-nominated artist Dana J., this powerful anthem is already finding a home in churches around the world.
Well, I feel a warm wind blowing, melting all the sadness off of my soul, and I smell the sweet cherry blossoms pouring all the gladness into my soul. In winter, I believe you. In springtime, I see you. It's so good to be with you. My hope has come. Lord, you make all things new. Your love is my breakthrough. Now I sing hallelujah. My hope has come. Now I sing hallelujah. My hope has come. Now I sing hallelujah. My hope has come.
Find Cherry Blossoms and all of our monthly singles wherever you listen to music.
For a long while, without intending to, I feel like I treated God like a drug, where I was just after the big high and the real ecstatic spiritual experience, and I would live off of that for a while until it ran out, and then I would find the next one. After a while, that becomes exhausting and completely unsustainable. It's my discovery that spiritual disciplines can actually remind you of God's worthiness even without the gift of an experience of Him. He is always worthy of worship, even if I don't feel at any given time compelled to worship. So I need to establish habits that make sure I'm giving God what He is due, even though I'm not getting the hit that I used to get.
You're listening to the Ferment Podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is Jesse Duley. Jesse is a worship pastor and the training coordinator for Vineyard Worship in the UK and Ireland.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at worshipteam.com. Worshipteam.com comes preloaded with over 12,000 songs, with new songs being added all the time. Hillsong, Bethel, Vineyard, Six Steps, Jesus Culture, just to name a few. Service building with Worship Team is a snap, and all the songs are completely legal and licensed. You can also find them on social media: Facebook at worshipteam.com, Twitter at worshipteam, Instagram at worshipteam_WT. Visit them at worshipteam.com for a free trial today. Complete worship planning with thousands of songs, easy interface, mobile apps, and legal rights for your church. All you need in one place, worshipteam.com.
Hey, what up, everybody? Adam here. This is the Ferment Podcast. And one more time, I am talking to a friend across the internet, all the way in the British Isles. My friend Jesse Duley is here with me. Why don't you say hello, Jesse?
Hi, everybody.
Jesse, tell everybody where you're at right now.
I live in the east coast of Scotland, kind of central Scotland, but that's not where I'm from. I'm from London, so you can understand me. That's how you know I'm not Scottish. So
Solid burn.
yeah.
Okay, and so what moved you up to the coast of Scotland like that?
I've been here 15 years, and I came up here to be part of a vineyard church plant, so kind of in on the ground floor of a new plant. Friends with the planters from another vineyard church back in London.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I want to start our little moment by asking you this question. Are you the Mike O'Brien of the UKI, or is Mike O'Brien the Jesse of the USA? Because I know you're in charge of training there now for the Vineyard Worship expression, right?
That's right. Oh, man. Well, I aspire to be the Mike O'Brien of the Vineyard in the UK.
Whoa.
That's for sure.
Solid. That's so good. Why don't you just tell everybody when you became the person who was sort of in charge of training for the UKI expression of Vineyard Worship?
Well, I've been involved in training, on and off for the 20 or so years I've been in the Vineyard. The last few years have been more intentional. I've been involved in a small team doing training with worship leaders from around the movement. At some point recently, Harmony, who's the director of worship here, had a conversation with Jimmy, who is the director of publishing, and they kind of saw that I was coordinating training. So I imagine the conversation went something like, "Hey, look, Jesse's coordinating training. Let's make him the training coordinator."
That's right.
So,
and that's that's a classic Vineyard story, right? Look around and find the person who's already doing it.
Yeah, pretty much. So it's just a formalization of something that was already happening. So,
Amen. Well, hey, that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you just about, your heart for training. I want to talk to you about how we approach theology as worship leaders and how we think and how we understand who we are and what we do.
Yeah.
But, sort of the shtick here on the podcast is I like to first just begin with letting people tell their story a little bit. So why don't you just take a moment and let us know who you are, where you're from, and what sort of family you grew up in, and when faith became alive for you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, like I said, I grew up in London, born and bred in the city of London, and church Christianity, faith was just completely absent from my world growing up. It was not a feature. My parents were hippies. And they've traveled all over the world in a VW camper van and done the whole hippie thing. Although my mom, it was just a phase she was going through. For my dad, it was the real deal. He's a hippie through and through. So growing up was, quite unusual in terms of the family environment. It's very much a community. I was raised by dozens of parents, and I was always surrounded by, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, basically, since consciousness came into being in my brain. So when did faith come alive? I was a properly angsty metalhead teenager, and it was around the time, I was about 16 and a half, and I got embroiled in something called a debating society in school, and I got...
What is that? What is a debating society?
It's not part of the curriculum. It's just something you do in your spare time. You sit in a room and you pick a controversial subject and you pick a side and you thrash it out. I always found myself on the opposing end of any religious argument. And these Christians just decided in their wisdom to invite me to their youth weekend away with church, and I went thinking I was gonna rescue these captives from their ignorant sort of following of mindless religion. So I went, and I was just undone, really, by the presence of God. It's just
okay. So it was like a youth event.
It was like 16, 17 year olds, 20 of them just going away on a weekend, a house on the south coast of England. They were worshiping, and I was like, this guy is really screwing up this song. So I just ripped the guitar from out of his hands and I started playing the song that they were trying to sing. It was called The Servant King by Graham Kendrick.
Okay.
And loads of modulations and all sorts of going on, really crazy chords going on. And they were studying the scriptures, and I was suddenly just kind of confronted with a Jesus that I didn't expect. And it took me 2 days, and I just gave my life to the Lord after that. So
Okay, so what did those people think when you, the Christian faith antagonist, like, did that send ripples through your school, or what was that?
Most people who knew me just thought I was on a new drug. They were used to me moving in mysterious ways. And so they just thought this is his new thing. And actually, so did a lot of the Christians who I was among. Just thought, like, maybe this is just another crazy thing that Jesse is kind of into for a time, and then he'll move on to the next thing. But yeah, it stuck longer than I expected, actually. So.
What about your mom and dad? What did they think?
Oh, boy. So my mom thought I'd been swept up into a cult because of how rapid the whole experience was. And then I invited her to my baptism, which was only about 4 weeks after I became a Christian. And she came to my baptism, and it's one of those God things. It turns out the church I had joined had actually run a kindergarten that I had been in when I was like running around as a 2 or 3 year old. And so my mother realized this is like a mainstream church, and, you know, she was still against it, but she didn't need to be afraid of it, I guess. My dad, on the other hand, I was really afraid of telling my dad, because he's the one he's known what he is about from a very young age. And I'm very much a mini me of him, or have been. It took me a while to tell him, but when I did, I was so completely surprised by his reaction. He said that he had never intended as a parent to raise a clone of himself, that he had only ever wanted me to have the capacity to make my own choices and know why I was making them. And that he was really proud of the fact that I had chosen something so antagonistic to his choices.
Wow.
He said he would get into fights with me about it, that I could expect that for the rest of my life, and that's been true as well.
Yeah, but that's beautiful. I do love that, given maybe his own journey, that he did have sort of the internal wisdom and kindness to be able to look at his own kid and say, you know, I just hope that you would be your own man. That to me, that's really beautiful.
That's basically it. That actually has brought us closer together in so many ways. Our relationship has become so much more honest and so much more vulnerable with one another since that point. Yeah, we still thrash out theological debates.
That's right.
And he sees the way the church is portrayed in the media, and he will come to me and he'll ask me questions like, you know, what would life on Mars do to your faith? Or what would, you know, do you believe in this whole 7-day creationism thing? And what do you think about the rapture and all of that kind of thing? And I can put his mind at rest on certain issues. And with other issues, I'm more of a conservative. So what am I going to do?
Isn't that wild how that works?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, I love that your dad does come to you, though. I also think that's beautiful, you know, that he would not just stick with maybe the mainstream commercial media approach to faith, but he would actually come to you. And there's something kind of beautiful about that relational outworking of, well, tell me about this.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Normally there's some whiskey involved as well, and we're kind of both.
Oh, okay. Well, I was gonna save that till the end, but we'll just go ahead and get that out of the way now since you brought it up. I mean, you're in Scotland.
Yeah.
Just go ahead and tell us, number one, what's your favorite whiskey? And number two, what's a whiskey that we should be looking for that maybe we could find?
Oh, wow. So the different regions of Scotland have all kinds of different kind of expressions of whiskey, but there's an island called Islay, and they make a really smoky, peaty expression in general. And my favorite distillery over there is called Bunnahabhain. Bunnahabhain, and you wouldn't know to say it that way when you read it on the bottle, but that's how it goes.
Got it. And
sweet and smoky.
That's right. And like I'm sure there's like an age categorization to that particular whiskey that you like.
Oh yeah, I love the 18-year-old of that, and I haven't been able to afford anything older than that, but I'm sure it's amazing.
That's right. Gosh, I just love talking to people about this kind of stuff. I do. I so love that. Yeah. Okay. I think there's 5 regions of whiskey in Scotland? Or are there more?
There's the Highlands and Islands, there's the Lowlands, there's Speyside, and there's Campbelltown.
Oh, so there's more. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all of them are making different kinds of whiskey. It's kind of like the regions are just kind of general descriptors of what you might expect, but, you know.
Okay, so I have one more question about this, and then we'll turn back to theology and worship. Is your palate developed enough that you could grab a couple whiskeys blind and have an idea of what region they came from?
On the whole, yeah. Like there's always the outliers. There's always the outliers that will throw you a curveball. But yeah, in general, the region is quite distinctive.
Amen. Okay, so virtual high five. There we go. Boom. Boom. That is amazing. I love talking to people about this kind of thing. That is so good. All right. Hey, let's switch gears just into some of the stuff that I know that you're passionate about and that you talk about. And I just want to maybe lob you some softballs and interact with them here a little bit.
Great.
Jesse, I know that you're a worship leader. I also know just through chatting with you and then seeing you online in some of our Vineyard Worship forums and stuff, I know that you're passionate about theology. I know you're passionate about how we articulate what we believe. Can you just talk to me and to us for a moment about how your passion for theology and articulation for what we believe and worship leading overlap? I mean, they clearly do. I'd love to hear you riff about that for a moment.
Personally, I've always been somebody who has never been content to just do things the way they've always been done. I've always wanted to kind of peer beneath the surface and behind the curtain and see how things work and why we do things certain ways. So I guess for me, they overlap because I'm trying to figure out why we're doing things the way we do them. And having discovered the why, trying to work out, is there some better way? Is there something that we haven't done yet that would actually help us to achieve this goal in a richer way or in a fresh way? Or I'm trying to get to know why a particular form has arisen so that we can see if it is the right form for the right time.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm wondering, as you've been a naturally curious person who's investigated the why, have there been moments of surprise, or have there been like moments where things came together for you in a new way when you began to investigate why?
I think for the way that I really respond to and the way I lead worship, it's not been so much a surprise as really a way of validating what I sort of know in my bones to be true already for me. When I actually do the same kind of work with other church liturgical traditions, I am surprised because I don't naturally resonate with some of those things. But of course, there's as much reasoning behind those ways of worshiping as there are anything that we do. So yeah, there's a lot of surprise in terms of the church universal.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing there as well is you're clearly a Vineyard worship leader and you're clearly a Vineyard guy, but as you've had experiences that are maybe a bit more ecumenical or outside of Vineyard streams, that's where you go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. You know, they're not just making this up.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't particularly resonate with me. It's not something I want to have as my kind of like regular meal every day, but I get why they're doing it. And there might be something about this that actually enriches and vivifies what we're doing if we were to take it seriously and actually listen to why they're doing it, as well as just observing them in the form that it has taken.
Yeah, I love that. So let's use this as a jumping off platform as well. Like, you know, you're a Vineyard person, I'm a Vineyard person, but at the same time, we do have experiences with other movements and churches outside of the Vineyard. And as we do, we get to encounter the gift that they bring to the world. I'd love to know what you think might be the gift that the Vineyard brings to the world. My friend Caleb Maskell has been talking to me about this a lot lately, like the Vineyard charism. What is it that we offer the world, you know? And I would love to know what you think might be our little token to the world.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I don't know about the world. I do know about Scotland. There's a Christian culture in Scotland that has kind of grown up, this kind of rhythm of revival followed by decline. And that sort of goes on. And that has kind of led to a situation where a lot of Christians here belong to churches that have one kind of expression, but they hunger after all the festivals and all the big name tours and all the big bless up kind of on the road ministry events and stuff like that. And I think that the Vineyard has something really important to remedy that culture where people are going to churches where they're hungry for something, but they're not getting it. And so they kind of go and they feed here and they feed there and that sort of thing. I think in the Vineyard, what we have is a structure that is soft enough to kind of bring all of those things into our regular expression of worship. And we're doing it in communities that are discipling one another. So I think the Vineyard's real contribution in Scotland is somewhere where, I mean, I appeal again to that wonderful term, the radical middle. I think the radical middle is still the unique gift of the Vineyard, that we can study the scriptures and we can do the stuff. You know, we can be conservative evangelicals, although that's become a dirty word over in America, I know. Yes. We can be conservative evangelicals on the one hand, but we can also be charismatic on the other and actually sort of experience the gifts of the Spirit. We can do that. We can live in the tension of the now and the not yet. We can experience both worlds in one family.
Amen.
I think that's one of the gifts. Yeah,
I think so too. And I love that I pitched the question to you, you know, with the frame being the whole world. And I love that you came back to me and said, well, I don't know about the world, but I know about Scotland. I think, hey, there's just some wisdom there. And I love that you're contextualizing your own thinking and practice to the people that you actually live with. So A, gold stars. But then B, I also agree. I think some of what you're experiencing in Scotland is the sort of thing that we also experience here in the United States as well, especially at least maybe the region that I'm from here in the South, where, you know, it's deeply religious, deeply historically religious. And there is a vein of what I would call revivalism, you know, and I would even use the ism part on there, where people have historically really have experienced genuine moves of the Spirit, where thousands of people have come to know Christ in what seemed like the blink of an eye. And so that does deeply shape people's expectations and even hunger and desire. And it sort of points people to the exceptional, and then all of a sudden you're missing out on most of your life. I think it's the danger, you know?
Yes.
So for me, like, I love the things that happen in revival. I love the move of the Spirit. But the danger with revivalism is you end up setting your expectations in such a way that you miss maybe 99% of your life.
I think that's right. And I feel like such a buzzkill whenever I talk about revival, because I don't actually want to put out the fire of revival. Revival in the sense of new life. You know, please, Jesus, give us new life. But I think that people are waiting for the big move at the expense of the little moves. And I think that the Vineyard is a church planting movement who is constantly seeking the presence of God. We're all about the hundreds of ways that we are seeking God's presence every day, rather than waiting for the big climactic event that is going to change a nation.
That's right.
So that's,
I think that's beautiful. And I do think that is some of our gift. And I just couldn't resonate with that more. I mean, I think that's the nail on the head. And part of what I heard you say, even, you know, maybe at a subharmonic level there, just sure. When you just reflected to me was, you know, maybe part of what we're called to, or maybe what we carry as Vineyard people when we're at our best, is not only capacity for the small moves, but I also hear a call to pay attention, to be the sort of pastors and even Jesus followers who are not just able to see the big thing, but are also able to see all the ways in which the Spirit is moving in our churches right now, and to call it out and to name it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I just hear that invitation to have good eyes to see when it looks like, man, well, you know, maybe nothing's happened, or maybe that's just not true. Maybe God is always at work. Maybe Jesus is true. Maybe we can believe him. My Father is always at work. Now, where is he at, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And bless what he's blessing, whatever it looks like.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Love that. I'd also love to know this too. I know you're kind of a book guy. I'm a book guy. I love to read stuff. What's a book you'd love to see Vineyard Worship leaders read right now?
This is, yeah.
I know. I
mean,
just
you're
said
killing-
a book. I said a book.
Yeah,
It's
you're-
killing you, right?
Absolutely killing me.
Yeah, you've got a list
Oh,
of 30
boy.
books, I'm sure.
Yeah, right. I mean, there are the books that have impacted me personally. I'm sure every Vineyard guy has heard of Emotionally Healthy Spirituality right now. But that book for me, kind of in one handy volume, kind of summed up 10 years of my life's personal inward journey. Right?
That's wonderful. When did you get hold of that book?
About 3, maybe 4 years ago, something like that. I was just emerging from a decade of doing some really deep emotional work and also trying to work out how I could do spiritual disciplines in a way that was realistic to who I am. And then I discovered this book and I thought, man, I could have saved 10 years if I'd known about this.
Oh, isn't that the way it goes? You spend 10 years digging, you spend 10 years searching, and then at the end of it, you find the book that would have solved it all.
Absolutely, that's exactly it. But I recommend that to, to whoever I see and whoever I speak to. I just think it's, there's so many roads that lead out of that book, but that's a really good place for worship leaders to start, because we have so many things that we are, that are living under the surface that we could really do with unearthing. And certainly in the realm of spiritual disciplines, I think that especially as a charismatic movement, we have still so much to learn.
Yeah, talk to me about that, because in a charismatic movement like the Vineyard, we tend to value, and I actually think part of our gift is to anticipate and expect that God will move in a meeting or move in our lives.
Right.
So talk to me about, on the one hand, we're Vineyard people and we have an expectation that God wants to move, that he does move. Mm-hmm. And then talk to me on the other hand, we have this, maybe historic approach of spiritual practices that keep us alive for the long haul. Can you just talk to me about that intersection for a moment?
Yeah, I'd bring it back to my own personal experience again of how I feel like for a long while, without intending to, I feel like I treated God like a drug, where I was just after the big high and the real ecstatic spiritual experience. And I would live off of that for a while until it ran out, and then I would find the next one. And after a while, that becomes exhausting and completely unsustainable. And it's my discovery that spiritual disciplines can actually remind you of God's worthiness even without the gift of an experience of him. He is always worthy of worship, even if I don't feel at any given time compelled to worship. So I need to establish habits that make sure I'm giving God what he is due, even though I'm not getting the hit
That's right.
that I used to get.
So on your journey, I mean, I'm hearing 10 years of walking into this and doing some unearthing and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
After a decade-long journey of discovering some of this, what are some of the spiritual practices that you found keep you alive? And maybe how do you make them a part of your daily, weekly, monthly, yearly rhythms or what have you?
The big one is Sabbath. Obviously Pete Scazzero and Emotionally Healthy Spirituality on Sabbath, but then I read a lot of other books around that, like Heschel on Sabbath, and Brueggemann has written a fantastic book called Sabbath as Resistance. And the more I explored the idea of Sabbath, the more I realized it was God's remedy for the whole of human history, really, but so much relevance for Sabbath in the way that the world turns now. I picked up Sabbath as a discipline at a time when I was working crazy hours. I was writing a dissertation on Revelation, and I was also working full time, and I was leading home groups and preaching and doing just too much, basically. And I picked up Sabbath, and I thought, there's no way I can do in 7 days, do what I need to do in 7 days in 6. And it just turned out that God completely undermined my economy of time. He actually caused me to become more productive in those 6 days than I had been in those 7, and yet I felt better about it. So Sabbath has been a crucial time.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, isn't it amazing that some ancient wisdom, and I would classify Sabbath in that truly ancient category, like deeply before Jesus shows up on the scene, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob stuff, Sabbath is popping out of the ground. And here we are, you and I, we're talking on computers, thousands of miles away, and Sabbath is still relevant to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been revolutionary. It's changed my life.
Okay. So tell me how you approach Sabbath. Like now, like what is your Sabbath like? What feels like Sabbath, or how do you make it a Sabbath?
I think one of the really crucial things that I learned from the reading I did around it is that Sabbath it's not just lying around and letting your hair grow. It's actually making conscious, intentional decisions to do things that actually vivify. There's that word again, revival. That actually revive. So I love to read. I love to ride my motorbike.
Nice.
I actually really like to exercise, which is why this whole sort of physical confinement thing is really killing me right now.
Same.
And I like to cook. And, one of the things I think I've really learned about Sabbath is that it doesn't matter what you do, as long as it's not productive in any meaningful sense. It's kind of just for the moment. It's something just to slow down and actually sort of live in the moment. And I find that is, whatever that looks like, that is just a reorientation that my body and my spirit needs.
Yeah. So, part of what I hear in what you're saying is to use spiritual discipline language, practices of consolation.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. There's that idea in Ignatian spirituality of consolation and desolation, things that take away from me, desolation, but then things that add life to me, consolation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One of the things, and I'm talking about my staff here at the church, one of the things that my staff and we've been working on for a few weeks just together is making lists of things that bring us life and just sharing them. These are the people, place, and things. There's a little book we're reading right now. These are the people, places, and things or practices that bring me life. Can we name them? Can we articulate them? And one of the things that we were finding as a staff is how many things that bring us life that we've forgotten about, and that just in simply articulating them has brought them to remembrance, and now we're looking for ways to re-implement them into our lives.
Right. Absolutely. There's a thing we do in church here. We call it a Thanksgiving service. We do it 2 or 3 times a year, and we discard the sermon in place of a kind of open mic thing where we invite everybody to just come up and say something that they're thankful for, something that they're grateful for. And it's in those moments that there's a bit of that neuroplasticity involved, isn't there? That you're actually sort of changing something in your brain by choosing to be thankful, by seeking out things that make you grateful, that make you feel alive. And I think that just reorients your whole vision of the world.
Amen. I love that as an idea for a service as well. I mean, what's more honoring to God and worshipful than to be together as the people of God and declare the goodness of God in that kind of way?
Right. Yeah.
This is also something interesting, just on this idea of like Sabbath, consolation, things that bring you life, vivify. When our staff wrote down all the things that bring them life, what was interesting is, no, we hadn't talked about it, but what was interesting is to a person, every single person on their list put things like friends, family, cooking, meals, hosting. It's like there are just certain practices that are deeply human that just bypass what I would call spiritual posturing. And they just bring you life. Like cook a meal, share it with a friend, have a glass of wine. That will make you a better person who's equipped to like face the other 6 days of the week in a more God-honoring fashion.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just hospitality sort of... I think that's the character of God, is to be hospitable. And so that's just the image of God just finding its way through the surface in us as well.
Oh, I love that. Let me ask you another, maybe I'm using air quotes here, little vineyard-y question.
Sure.
Jesse, is there any essential piece of maybe what we would call vineyard values that we need to hold fast to in these days that we're living in right now? And I'm thinking of, we're living in COVID-19 days. We're living in the days of globalization, unprecedented times. So is there some part of our DNA that we need to keep a grip on?
Yeah, we've got to keep pursuing intimacy with God. When I teach about the sort of values that we have in worship, I said there's no real hierarchy to this, but intimacy is the most important one.
That's right. There's no hierarchy. But let me just let you know what's at the top.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that given the peculiarities of this time that we're in right now, we're going to discover the extent to which any part of our relationship with God has been lived out vicariously. So if we've been depending on other people to connect with God in any way, in any unhealthy way, because I should qualify that, because I think community is a crucial aspect of what it looks like to be a disciple.
That's right.
But if there is any aspect of our faith that we have outsourced, we've no longer got that to rely upon. So we've got to pursue God in the intimate spaces so that we can reconnect where we've allowed that connection to sever or loosen in any way. So yeah, I just think that desire, that passion, that pursuit of the presence of God is going to find itself rising again to the surface as we, as individuals, rediscover what it means to be his child, his son, his daughter, once everything else is stripped away.
Yeah, that's really great. And, when you were talking about that, I just couldn't help but think the world is sort of gripped in this challenge. The virus is no respecter of geography, race, religion, socioeconomic status. And so there's this sort of global challenge. But then there's this opportunity for us, especially as Christians, there's this opportunity to actually reconnect to God again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would say one of the other things that has really been kind of on my heart is just to keep remembering the poor. Like this whole physical distancing thing, people want to call it social distancing. I want to call it physical distancing because I don't want to be socially distant.
Yes, that's right.
But this whole physical distancing, it's actually, we're quite privileged, those of us who, you live in the US, I live in the UK, and we have at least the possibility of physical distancing. In fact, I've got the privilege of being able to survive by, without opening the door for the next probably 2, 3, 4 weeks. I'll start eating lentils, but, but I at least have that privilege. Others are living hand to mouth and living in crowded conditions and all that sort of thing. So we've just got to be conscious, check our privilege every once in a while, be grateful, and do what we can to help others.
No, I love that. One of the things that I only realized, I realized this by reading Bruegger many years ago. But one of the key aspects of being rich or acquiring a certain kind of economic power is that riches in the world system always separates you from people more. You know, so the goal in some ways of riches is to become more independent, more isolated, house on a hill, gated neighborhood, you know, more and more distance from the real world. And I think your word is a real corrective. Like, remember the poor, even guys like you and I who are not fantastically rich by UK standards or by USA standards, but by world standards, we're living in just a really different, you know, a different reality from a lot of people.
Absolutely. And that's not to diminish any of the real challenges that we face.
That's right.
That's not to say that there aren't real questions to ask and answer about how we survive this and how we deal with this. But I think it's really important to recognize that some of the questions we're asking aren't even on the radar for some people who, for their situations, you know, some of the things that we take for granted are real matters of life and death for them. It's
that's so true.
Yeah.
Great word. Well, let me ask you another question just in this sort of COVID physical distancing space. What do you think it means to be a worship leader in a moment of quarantine and isolation? Because you and I, we were chatting off mic just about, okay, we're going to have this virtual conversation. And you and I have been telling people for maybe many years that one key aspect of being a Christian is it's an embodied faith, you know? It's like it's in our own physical bodies. Paul says that we are the body of Christ. We come together on a Sunday morning. We sing together. You know, it's an auditory experience. Maybe we give hugs. We see people. There's just something that's happening there. And now all of a sudden we're doing this virtually. Yeah. So what does it mean to be a virtual worship leader? Is that possible? I don't know.
This is such a hard question to answer. I think as part of a staff team here in the church that I belong to, we've been kind of reinventing church like for the last, you know, each Sunday for a few weeks now. And I don't really feel like I've had a great deal of capacity to process emotionally and theologically what it is that we're doing. It's been more a case of just get the thing that we used to do and make it happen in a different space and in a different way. I mean, the short answer to the question, the direct answer to the question is I don't know. That's the truth of it. The words that have been ringing in my ears have been from another friend of mine called Nigel Hemming. He said recently to me and to a couple of other worship leaders that the thing that people need right now isn't content, but it's connection. There is no shortage of worship, air quotes, content on the internet, and people can experience as much of that as they like. But what people really need right now is connection. So my feeling, this is more of an instinct than a well-formed theological thought. My feeling is that somebody you know leading worship badly is 1,000,000 times better than somebody you don't leading worship well.
What a word. What a word. Know, I feel that, Jesse. I totally feel that. I mean, there's something about leaning into our shared life together in this moment. And the image that I've been having lately is this is a moment for us to not just lean into our worship leading, but lean into our worship pastoring.
Absolutely.
Not that those are in opposition to one another, but to really reach out to our teams and our church. And to the people we really know.
Yeah, of course. Here's another thing that I have been thinking about this. I think we need to be real about the fact that this is really rubbish. Like this.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that.
Like, I think there's absolutely no doubt that we will get something good out of this, that we will learn things, that certain things that were dead will come to life, and certain people will connect that have disconnected and all of that. But that's a long way from saying that there's anything good about this. I don't think this is a good situation to be in. I don't think this is how we were meant to live as community. So I think it's just important to be real about that. The fact that this is us adapting to a less than ideal situation.
So we don't have to live in denial in this moment. We can call it what it is.
Let's call it what it is and make the best of it. I've always been somebody that's tried to make the best of a situation, but I'd rather be in a different situation. Let's be honest about that.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. It's really strange singing songs by yourself in a room, isn't it?
yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, the first week that we sort of, air quotes again, went virtual,
Right.
I was preaching to a camera, which was just hugely
Yeah,
disappointing.
yeah.
I mean, at least just for my ego, I need people to work with
Yeah.
me during this sermon,
Yeah, for sure.
Like any good sermon is a two-way conversation between the pastor and the
I think
congregation.
so.
That was taken away.
Yeah.
And then the next week, this last week, I was like, Heather, we just have to can this. I can't preach to the camera anymore. So she and I just did a conversation about the Ezekiel text together, and that was better.
Right.
Like it was still on camera, but it was at least
There's
a
some
conversation
dialogue
about the
going
text,
on,
and
yeah.
that felt, and that just felt a lot better to me. So, even in this moment, our staff is just scrambling to go, how can we, at least visually and even actually, develop more of an idea of conversation rather than performance around whatever this is.
Yeah. I think those are the sorts of things that we're going to discover how much importance they have to us, and maybe absence will make the heart grow fonder, so that when we get back in the room together,
oh my gosh,
we can celebrate them more.
Yeah, I saw someone on Twitter a couple days ago say that there's going to be 2 Easters this year. One of them will be Easter Sunday.
Yeah.
And the second Easter will be whenever this thing lifts off of us and we can all go back to church together.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There will be celebration in the camp.
Oh, my word. There's going to be, I think that's going to be explosive.
Yeah.
Dude, well, hey, thanks for this conversation.
My pleasure.
This has been so good. I would love to just maybe wrap this up with one more question, and it's the question I'm asking everybody this season. I would love to know, what's the dream in your heart right now, or what are you hoping for?
Oh, wow. I guess this goes back to kind of your original questions about my role in training in the Vineyard. My overarching kind of mission comes from something John and Debbie Wright, who are the directors of the Vineyard in the UK, said that they wanted to make sure that every Vineyard church had a good worship leader. And I've since upgraded that to a great worship leader. And actually, I want to upgrade that again to a great worship pastor.
That's right.
It's such a privilege for me to be able to speak into the lives of people that are ministering in their churches in this ministry around the UK and Ireland. And it really is my heart to see all of those people really dig into their own unique contribution in the world of worship, rather than just imitating the good stuff that they've seen going around them. I want to know what creativity looks like for a new season. I want to know what kind of expression of worship haven't we seen yet? What haven't we heard yet?
That's right.
Yeah, I want to see that. And I feel like my role in that is to try and get people to believe in themselves more, to actually believe that God has given them unique gifts. And I think that it's simply the case that too many people have disqualified themselves and put their crazy ideas on the back burner because they sound crazy. But I want to see all the crazy ideas come to the top. So
I love that. I love that. It is funny in this highly connected virtual world that we live in, where you can see certain aspects of worship, come to the top, or, become very visible. And then we all become imitators.
Oh man, that is my bugbear. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, the backside of that is kind of what I'm hearing you say. We just end up burying maybe the gifts that God has given us.
That's
because
right.
we're just drowning in comparison. And then maybe the thing you were born to do, you don't do it.
Yeah. It's a really weird sort of irony that the internet and YouTube and all that sort of thing had such great potential for opening up the world to us and letting us see all the different ways that people were doing things. And instead, what it's done is it's homogenized everything, and it's created what we consider gold standards that we're all trying to sort of attain to. And in that way, stifling creativity. So I just want people to to think outside the box, to leave all that behind. And like I said, to do something badly rather than have somebody else do it well.
One of the things, one of my, cohorts and one of my buddies here in the United States, Michael Bryan, says is he's kind of talking in terms of songs, songs written at local churches. He's like, a song written at your local church that maybe is a 10 at your local church, maybe regionally or nationally might be a 6. If we're just being hardcore, rating everything, maybe that song at your church is a 10, nationally is a 6.
Yeah.
But it still should be done because it's a 10 at your local church, right?
Absolutely.
Like that's, yeah.
Yeah, we've just got
I love that picture.
Really strange expectations for all our stuff. It's like it's got to be a global hit or it's not worth doing. And that's just such an impoverished way of thinking about it, I think.
Well, and it also, in some ways, it rejects the glory and the image of God that he has placed in people in all sorts of places around the world, right? I mean, I'm talking to you. You're from London, living in Scotland. There should be something about your worship that if I were to come over, that should be uniquely Scottish. It should have Scottish fingerprints in it. It should be something indelible about it. Right,
with a bit of Dick Van Dyke in there as well. So.
Yeah, but that would be the hope. And I'm telling you, just as you say that, there's something that deeply resonates in my heart too. Is the idea of like songs from places.
It would be so tragic if the worship in, the Midlands of the United Kingdom were exactly the same as somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa or, or on the Indian subcontinent. It just wouldn't make sense. It would be so deeply tragic. That's one of the reasons why I bang on about the values all the time, is because I think if people look behind the curtain and actually see why we're doing something, then they might actually allow their form to take a different shape in their contexts.
Beautiful.
Yeah, just ideas like intimacy and integrity will look different in one country than they will to another. So
that's right. Yeah, they're flexible, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, Jesse, thanks for spending some time with us, and thanks for sharing your heart and just your thoughts and everything with us. I found them to be very moving.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So listen, guys, if you're listening, wherever you're at, we just want to say blessings to you as we all figure this stuff out in a newly virtual space. And maybe you can pick up some of what Jesse was saying there, especially at the end about feeling free to be who you really, really are in your local context. All right, everybody. Peace.
Hey everyone, Casey Coram here, producer of the podcast. Thanks for listening. I just wanted to remind you of a couple things. First of all, check out Cherry Blossoms, our new single, wherever you listen to music. Also, join us on YouTube and Facebook Live, Sunday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern for our Vineyard Worship Together daily worship stream. All right, people, stay safe. Peace.